Go ahead, Brother Kevin. I don't have like a bio for Kevin. I'm sorry I don't have that. But Kevin, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and we can get started.
Definitely. Bless up, everybody. How you doing? Hi. And thank you, Rusey, for allowing me to be here this evening. It's an honor and privilege to be amongst, the elders and honoring our ancestors. My name is King Kevin Dorival. I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia, born and raised in Fort Lauderdale. My family, I'm Haitian. Well, I consider myself African Haitian. And my family are from Cap Haitien, Haiti, which is the northern part of Haiti. And I'm an author. I've written 3 books. Those are the books you see behind me. The Wind in the Mirror, the most recent one. It's called The Wind in the Mirror, Activating Your Superpowers, Mind, Body, and Spirit. My first book is called The Courage to Believe, Never Give Up, Keep Moving Forward. And the second one is my claim to fame that took me to London, actually, on a major book tour called The 7 Types of Queens, King's Desire. So I do have a couple more books under my belt that I would like to write and publish, which I will, God willing. And the next book that I'm going to release is related to this topic here this evening on Haiti. It's going to be called A 200-Year War Against Haiti, America's 200-Year War Against Haiti. And so I'm going to reveal a lot of information, and some of it, you're going to get a snippet of it here with this presentation. And I'm a father, can't forget to say that. I have a 6-month-old baby, so that's giving me a new boost of energy and just, drive, just to make it happen, whatever it takes, within reason, of course. So besides that, I'm loving Atlanta. I own a small company, a small motor remediation and full service cleaning company. I'm doing pretty good, to be honest. I'm thankful. I wish I'd have been doing this years ago. But because it's a much needed service here in Georgia with the moisture issues. And this evening, the title of today, actually, let me share my screen. Should I begin now?
Yes, Beth, you have the floor. You have the floor, King Kevin.
Okay, just to confirm, I have, 15 minutes, an hour?
The whole session goes to 6:30, and you can do it like how you would want. You could present up until 6 and then take question and answer. There's already a question in the chat for you by Mama Akante. She said, "What business did you say?"
Oh, it's called Sky Clean Air, Mold, and Water Removal Services. So we remove mold from people's home, mainly here in Georgia, but I'm certified to serve anywhere in the country. If the project big enough, we'll get up and pack and drive or fly out to whatever state in the country. But a lot of homes have mold. 70% of the homes in America have mold in them. So it's a very promising business. There's work if you need work. So even if you're not in Georgia, but you need some consultation and you have questions regarding something that looks like mold growing in your home, or you're not sure what to do about your crawl space or basement, you can email me or call me. I have the information here at the end, my email at the bottom of the website. But for those who don't know, my website is kevindorival.com, my first and last name.com. And the company website is skycleanairservices.com. But I'll make sure I put it inside the comments, And so without further ado, let's begin, because I've been anxious to give a presentation like this with no hold bar, no holds bar. So, but I will be respectful and mindful that the elders and not everyone, like explicit details or language.
You have the floor, man. We're following you.
Okay, now we rocking. So can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
All right, today's February 23rd, 2020, and today's lecture is called Black Knowledge Matters Wednesday, Black Leaders That We Don't Know, and I'm highlighting General Toussaint Louverture of the Haitian Revolution. And by the way, today is Dr. Amos Wilson's birthday as well.
Wow.
So hopefully, you know, we make him proud this evening. All right. Haiti's unique claim to history. Haiti has a very unique slice of history, if I can say that. The revolution lasted from 1791 to 1804, and it culminated into the first independent nation in the Caribbean, the second democracy in the Western Hemisphere, and the first Black republic in the world. And it was also General Toussaint. He had wrote the second constitution in the Western Hemisphere after the United States. That's something that a lot of people don't know. And so I'm going to get more into detail about that. But this lecture is not completely about Haiti and General Toussaint. However, most of it is, but there are several other characters or individuals I like to honor with this presentation. So the agenda, discuss Black leaders, personalities, accomplishments, and legacies. Starting with Thomas Sankara. He's someone that I didn't know about up until 2010. And I was just so impressed by what I heard and what I researched and read, you know, books written about him and videos I've watched and articles. You know, he turned Bukano Safu, which means the land of the incorruptible people or land of the upright man. He turned the economy around in 3 years. You know, it was one of the most poorest countries or impoverished countries in Africa, and he turned it around. And how he did that was he kicked out the foreigners because they weren't really investing in the community, the local community. He forced everyone to practice Ujamaa, cooperative economics. You know, and what I liked about what Thomas Sankara did is that he forced everyone to buy and eat food made by people in Bukano Safu. So he made the money circulate, you know, within the community, which is powerful, which we can learn from today. And he also had a literacy campaign that increased the literacy rate from 13% in 1983 to 73% in 1987. You know, so people actually listened to what he was saying. They believed in him, and he believed in the country. And if you go on YouTube, you'll see videos of him working in the fields. Now, how many presidents would you see working in the fields with actually working and sweating, you know, put it in sweat equity in the fields with their people? Very rare. He rejected loans by the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and World Bank, which most of you know, whenever you take these large, big money, millions of dollars loans from these, you know, two entities, if you don't pay those loans, then it gives them permission to have whichever foreign power to come, whoever colonized your country, to come and take over your land and resources, and which we've seen time after time after time. This country was colonized by France, which they've supposedly, which we're going to find out, because the guy who assassinated him, Campura, who was his best friend actually, supposedly it's rumored that France had him assassinate Thomas Sankara and 12 other members of his cabinet inside the capital, which was a very devastating. And October 15, 1987. There's a lot of songs written about him, about the people, and it took about 21 years after his death that you know, there's been investigation and arrest for the people who were involved in the assassination of him and the other members of the cabinet. Very important figure, very important figure. And I believe his blueprint of how he turned around Bukano Safu is something that many countries can learn from. And also, if you guys have any questions, please put in the comment. I'll be glad to stop and you know, address the question, or I can wait, you know, at the end. All right, next person I'd like to acknowledge is Queen Nzinga. You know, Queen Nzinga was the queen of two countries, two kingdoms, Ndongo and Matamba. You know, she fought the Portuguese nearly all her life. She's a woman that's featured in my second book, 7 Types of Queens, King Desire, as within the Warrior Queen chapter, which I have several women from around the world featured in that book. And she took her people and their freedom so seriously that she literally, you know, she killed her own brother because her brother was a traitor. He was taking, members of her tribe and their tribe, because he was the king after their father died, and selling them to the Portuguese. And so when she found that out, she killed her brother. So this was a very revolutionary woman, and I never heard about her up until, man, I don't even remember, but it was shortly before I wrote Seven Queens. Yes. Was there a question? Okay. I'm sorry. Let me go back. She was brilliant, diplomatic, a wise warrior queen, fought against enslavement of her people up until her last breath, literally. And she was smart. She aligned herself with the Dutch to defeat the Portuguese, to hold them off. And just to also explain a little more about Queen Nzinga, she was able to get respect in a country or a continent that eventually turned to not really hold women in a high regard. That wasn't how it was in ancient times throughout the continent of Africa. But as you know, in Kemet, there were women that were rulers, that were leaders as well, alongside the pharaohs. There was a story, a cow story that I read in a book. I don't remember the name of the book. It was a very small book written about Queen Nzinga. And there's a story about one of her father's generals who did not want to accept her rulership, because, he was serving her father. And so he did not respect that a woman could be the king, so to speak. And so he had a lot of cows, and she would summon him to come, him and many other leaders to come to her office or to her castle and speak to her. And regarding, strategies and how they're going to fight the Portuguese or whatever the situation was. And he kept refusing to meet with her. So what she did was she sent her men to his farm, and they slaughtered all his cows except for one. And he had, cows are, the prized possession, that's your value, your worth. Is how many, as a man, how many cows you have, just like in the Mali tribe. You're not a man unless, or you can't support your family unless you have a certain amount of cows, cows as well. So she left him one cow, and he came to her crying, like he felt so traumatized by that experience. And ever since then, she had his loyalty. So she knows how to get her point across. Next person.
Before you go on, with respect to Queen Anne and Nzinga, there was one of our ministers had visited Bahia in Brazil, and they have a tradition there that she actually sent some of her warriors to Brazil to fight the Portuguese there. Like they, they went into slavery with the Portuguese, got in Brazil and started fighting there. I don't know if you're aware of that, but that's what they teach in Bahia, in Brazil.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And there's so much more that I would like to learn about her, because I'm a true believer that women are just as powerful as men, if not more powerful in certain aspects. And in a male-dominated society, we're not taught these things. And so I've just literally scratched the surface when it comes to Queen Nzinga, and she has several different names. The way you pronounce her name, how you spell it, but one thing is for sure, she was a leader, bona fide leader. Next I would like to mention is Jean-Jacques Dessalines, who became Emperor Jean-Jacques Dessalines. For those who don't know about Mr. Dessalines, he was, some reports, some books say that he was born in West Africa. Some books say that his parents are from the Congo, his Congolese parents. Some books say that he was born in Haiti. I'm not sure which one to believe, but one thing is for sure, Mr. Dessalines was somebody not to play with. He was very serious when it came to his freedom and the freedom of his people. As a matter of fact, Mr. Dessalines earned the name the Tiger because he was so ferocious when it came to fighting, especially the French. He hated white people with a passion. if you think what Nat Turner did in Virginia with the rebellion, if you think that was something, Jean de Sallin was 10 times more ferocious when it came to eliminating white people. He sent an order to kill 5,000 French men, women, and children. He wanted to wipe out all white people, especially the French, that enslaved him and his people. He was abused for many, many years on the plantations. So he developed a hatred, unknown hatred to white folks. And so he expressed it obviously when he became the ruler after General Toussaint. He was one of the top lieutenants that Toussaint trusted. And as ferocious and as you can say mean he feared Toussaint respectfully. He really followed Toussaint's orders. He never double-crossed Toussaint. Now, during the Haitian Revolution, was kicked off roughly around, the book says 1791, but really it started in 1790 because there was a letter that Toussaint wrote to him that was dated 1790. And he had this phrase, coupe tête boule caille. In Creole, that means, well, in English, what I just said was Creole, which what Haitians speak, my people speak, we speak. It means cut their heads and burn the houses. So that was plain and simple. It wasn't, a ambiguous order when he gave his soldiers. He kept it simple: cut their heads and burn the houses. So there's a famous picture that some of you guys may not have seen, where you have, we call it a whiteout, where you have white men being hanged on the island. This was the white man's fear. This is why Willie Lynch letter was so important to plantation owners, because this was their fear, that Black people be enslaved Africans killing white people. So this was a very popular image. If you take a closer look at this picture, you'll see hanging posts throughout the island. You see about, I think it's about, wow, maybe 20 or so, and white men hanging. This was an image that gave the white folks nightmares throughout the world, in the United States, in Jamaica, Barbados, wherever there were slave owners, they feared the Africans in Haiti because of just how ferocious, the battles became. And the reason, and just, out of respect for Mr. Dessalines, Emperor Dessalines, he was, as I mentioned, he was abused severely by the slave masters. There was a tree, the whips on the whelps, from the whips on his back, is covered with whelps. So he developed a strong hatred and just couldn't wait to actually fight, and he had an opportunity. And also he named himself emperor, emulating Napoleon, because Napoleon crowned himself emperor. So he was, in a way, I think he was throwing it in Napoleon's face, like, I could call myself emperor as well. And he called his wife Claire empress. So I thought that was very impressive. Next, I'd like to talk about a woman that just came to my attention. Her name is Clara Bell Williams. There's actually a Clara Bell Williams Day on February 15th, and it was first celebrated in 2005. Now, Clara Bell, she was a wife, a mother, educator, and activist. And the reason why she's one of the Black leaders that, that I like to highlight, that I'm highlighting this evening, is because most people don't know about this woman. She was actually, when she was going to college in school at New Mexico University, they won't let her sit down in the classroom. So she literally would study and listen to the lectures in the hallway and taking notes. And when I read that, I was like, you got to applaud that. That's someone who is not going to allow the racist bigotry of white folks to stop her from getting her education. And I wish our children today would take heed to, her ambitions to get educated. And she was also a valedictorian in 1908 at New Mexico College of Agriculture and Mechanic Arts in the fall of, she attended that school in 1928 as well. She graduated, taught students how to read during the day as a teacher, and she taught their parents how to read at night. So she wasn't just serious about her education, but educating other Black children as well, which, you know, definitely commendable. She taught at Booker T. Washington School in New Mexico for 20 years. There's buildings, streets named after her at New Mexico University. And they also actually apologized to her for, you know, the behavior that, you know, the professors were giving her, and just, you know, trying to make amends. So they gave her an honorary doctorate. Her 3 sons, they all went to college and graduated with medical degrees, and they even created a clinic named after her, her boys. So that's just, you know, just to speak the volume of how important Mrs. Clara Bell Williams was. You know, it's someone that I would like to study a lot more. As a matter of fact, I'm going to look up and look up a book I can find more information about her. I just think that was so impressive, how she refused to allow the bigotry of others to stop her, you know, from moving forward. Next, I would like to discuss King Henry Christophe. King Henry Christophe, that's the gentleman here you see in the coat. That's his wife and daughter. This was a painting that was lost but found in New York in 2020, right before the, let me rewind. In the middle of the pandemic, you know, this painting was found, and they had honored him in New York with the big dinner with this painting. A very rare painting. It's probably worth a couple $1 million. He's one of the chief generals of the Haitian Revolution Army. He built the Citadel, the largest fortress in the Western Hemisphere. And he also built Sanssouci, which is a palace, beautiful palace, and which both I was able to go visit and see when I went to Haiti, which you see some pictures as well. And he fought in the Battle of Savannah. A lot of people don't know about the Battle of Savannah. The Battle of Savannah, and he wasn't always King Henry Christophe. He changed his name, which is something that is common with the 3 leaders of the Haitian Revolution, the top 3 leaders, General Toussaint, Jean de Sallin, and King Henry Christophe. They all 3 changed their names, and I will explain why. So at the age of 14, he joined the Chasseurs Volunteers of Saint Domingue, which means the volunteer soldiers of Saint Domingue, which was the name of Haiti at that time, the name of the island, before it became Haiti. And he was one of the 800 soldiers who fought in Savannah. Now, Savannah is one of the oldest cities in Georgia, in the country. You know, I visited there twice. This is the monument that was built, and I hope that the Haitian American Historical Society is tuning in, because I did invite them. They raised the funds to get this built. This monument cost roughly about $700,000 to be built. It is very impressive. It's right there in the town square in Savannah. You can't miss it. If you go into Savannah, the heart of Savannah, you cannot miss the statue. But that's him, the drummer boy that you see there on the left, with the drums and the soldiers. This is and so a lot of people don't know that Haitians fought so that Americans can have independence. You know, something that's not taught in the school books. And I didn't know about this until I read this article about the fundraiser that was going on to get this built, you know, some years ago when I was living in Florida, and I was just impressed by it. So I've been studying ever since. I have a couple of videos on YouTube about it. Actually, videos I shot while I was there in Savannah. The Citadel. The Citadel is a very impressive structure. It's 3,000 feet up in the sky, but on top of the mountain. You have to walk about 2 hours, from the bottom of the mountain to get there. It took about 200,000 Africans, or say Haitians now, to get this built. Some were, enslaved Africans, others were free, but they built this. Actually, I have a rock here, and hopefully I find it. I have a rock here that I took from the Citadel while I was there. And the reason why this is important, the Haitians had built this so that they would not be enslaved again. Slavery was the #1 enemy of the Haitians. That's all they thought about 24/7, because they refused to ever go back on the plantations and being enslaved. And so God knows how many cannons they have there. I don't remember the number, but there's dozens of cannons, hundreds of cannonballs, and the cannonballs are very heavy, you know, and the fortress is very impressive. I mean, if you ever go to Haiti, this is in northern Haiti in a town called Milot, you have to go see it. I read about it for so many years, and so when I finally got a chance to go there in 2016, this was the one thing I had to do. As a matter of fact, there's a painting I have here. I can't find that rock. It's up on my desk somewhere, but I do have this painting here. So you can see it. I bought this painting when I left the citadel going to the Palace Sanssouci. And so one of the artists, Haitian artists that was there was selling this, and I had to get it, you know, and bring it home. And I wasn't gonna leave Haiti without it. Next, I would like to also mention that UNESCO cited this place, labeled it as a historical significance. So the UNESCO actually preserves this fortress, and it's amazing that this place is still here after all the earthquakes. That is still there. That just shows the ingenuity and the craftiness, you know, and the hard work of our people to be able to build something like this on top of a mountain. And it's just impressive. And I'll show you guys some pictures. This is Sanssouci. This is the palace. The palace that also King Henry Christophe built. Now it's kind of, you know, the walls are kind of, they're tumbling, there's no doubt about it. But I've seen one video of this palace when it was, you know, still intact. But this was one of the most beautiful palaces in the world. As a matter of fact, and I have to mention the citadel is the largest fortress in the Western Hemisphere, right? But they don't have it on the list of one of the 7 wonders of the world. You know, some people consider it as one of the 7 wonders of the world, and some people label it the 8th wonder of the world. I personally believe this is one of the most impressive buildings, you know, in the planet. You know, and some believe that King Henry Christophe, he didn't just build this just to build it. He built it so he can see all across the ocean, and you know, any approaching ships, you know, he can blow them up with the cannonballs. But the cannons were never used. The war never came that he was waiting on. So it's possibly that he has treasure up there. I believe he has treasure up there. There's probably millions and millions of dollars of gold and silver hidden in there. But it's very dangerous at certain places of this palace, but of this fortress. Let me continue moving on here. Now let's get to the man of the hour, General Toussaint Louverture. Now, I kept the apostrophe here because I wanted you guys to see. Many of you may have seen his name spelled like this with the apostrophe between the L and the O, but in actuality, that apostrophe was never there. So no one, I really don't know where that comes from. But if you read C.L.R. James' book, The Black Jacobin, which is a very, very powerful and wonderfully written book, you got to read it. You know, it's about Toussaint and the Haitian Revolution. As a matter of fact, any book that's written about Toussaint, they use the Black Jacobin book written by C.L.R. James as a reference. And this book, and C.L.R. James' book was published, I want to say 1920, 1926, somewhere in between there. It's one of my favorite books. You know, I've read it. Now, Toussaint was named Francois Dominique Breda, but you have Francois Dominique Toussaint. He took off the Breda to call himself Toussaint Louverture, and I'm going to get to why that's important. He was born on May 20th, 1743, in Cap Haitien, Haiti, which is where my family's from. So it's very likely that I'm a direct a descendant of Toussaint. I truly believe so. So can nobody tell me any different? He died in April 7th, 1803, in a dungeon in France. And we'll get to how he ended up being a dungeon in France, all the way from Haiti. His wife, Suzanne Simone Baptiste Louverture, she was also a warrior queen. He had 3 children, Isaac Louverture, Placide Louverture, and Saint Jean Louverture. And he also adopted children. He was a humanitarian. He was a statesman. He was definitely a soldier. And I would like to briefly recite a letter that Marcus Garvey said regarding General Toussaint Louverture. And it's important that I say this because you're going to understand the type of level General Toussaint was. For someone like Marcus Garvey, who you all know is the godfather, creator of Pan-Africanism. Well, I can't say the creator, but definitely the godfather of it. He promoted it, heavily. There's many other people before his time that was a Pan-Africanist. Jacques de Sallin, for example. Now here it is. And what I'm going to recite is from the book called Life and Lessons of Marcus Garvey. Ladies and gentlemen of the Negro race, for it's time to cast out and forget the hero worship of other races and to start out immediately. We must create our own martyrs, elevate to positions of fame, and honor those distinct men and women who have made a contribution to our racial history. Sojourner Truth deserves to be alongside the sainthood of Joan of Arc. Crispus Attucks, George William Gordon, both are entitled to the halos of martyrdom with no less glory than any other martyrs. The statesmanship and brilliancy of General Toussaint Louverture of the Haitian Revolution outshone those of Napoleon, Cromwell, and George Washington. Hence, deserves the highest praise of all heroes of men. Africa has produced countless women and men during times of war and peace whose bravery outshine those of any other people. So why not see good and excellence in yourselves? Now, I memorized this letter from Marcus Garvey's book because I did a video last year on Sarnetta TV. Many of you watch Sarnetta TV. I did an interview with him regarding the current events in Haiti. And I read that letter from the book. And so a friend of mine who watched that video, he was like, if you feel that letter is so important to you and so important to what you're saying about Toussaint, you should have that memorized. So thanks to him, he kind of pushed me to memorize that. And I'm glad he challenged me. That's how we need to challenge each other, to raise the standard.
King Kevin,
yes.
Can I add, I don't know if you're familiar with the dub poet from Jamaica, Muta Baruka. He has a song with that quote. He has a whole album livicated to the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey, and one of his songs has that quote. I'll put it in the chat as soon as I find it, and I think you might enjoy it.
Yeah, thank you, please do. Because there were brothers and sisters all around the world who celebrated General Toussaint Louverture. As a matter of fact, you can even go into another country in the Caribbean or the United States if you came from Haiti, which is interesting because the way they treat the Haitians now at the borders. But for a different reason, back then during the 18th century, early 19th century, they didn't allow people. His reputation was so powerful, for defeating the British, defeating the French and the Spanish. This was unheard of. And for a Black man to do it, oh no, this can't be told. So they tried to put an embargo on this history and this information. But as you know, we're so creative. Word got around other plantations and it sparked the flame all around the world. So there was revolutions everywhere. Not that Haiti was the only country having, revolutions. You had the Tacky rebellion in Jamaica that was almost successful, but it wasn't. They didn't win that battle against Britain at that time. You had Togo. He had a revolution. You have Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey here in the United States. They were all inspired by this man we call General Toussaint Louverture. Believe it or not, it was incredible. As a matter of fact, in during the Jim Crow era, well, not Jim Crow, what's the other name? The segregation is another name. What's the Jim Crow? Yeah, Jim Crow. During the Jim Crow era, when schools were segregated, there's a professor named John Bracey from the University of Massachusetts, a Black professor. And he stated that when he was growing up in DC, in elementary and middle school, in all Black schools, every Black child, boy and girl, wanted to be Toussaint in the plays. They even fought to be Toussaint in the plays. Can you believe that? You know what I'm saying? Why is that? Because the schools were segregated and they highlighted the Black leaders, and he was one of the top. And if you couldn't be General Toussaint inside of a school play, then you fight to be Jacques de Sallin. If you couldn't become Jacques de Sallin because too many people wanted to be him, then you became, you put on a costume of King Henry Christophe. So that's how important it was. Now, when I heard Dr. Bracey state that, how he grew up before schools were integrated by Brown versus Board of Education, 1954, I was like, so what happened? Why is it that this information was, eradicated from school books? It's because this history galvanizes Black people, so they have to keep it away from it. Just like Marcus Garvey, you're not going to learn about Marcus Garvey in high school, in the school books. If you're not going to learn about Marcus Garvey, you're definitely not going to learn about General Toussaint Louverture or the Haitian Revolution. Because I know I didn't. And growing up in school, the reason why I began to really study him in high school when I was a junior, I remember reading in the history class. I remember this like it was yesterday. There was a book I was reading, and there was one line in the book, and it said, General Toussaint defeated Napoleon. And I was like, Napoleon? All my life, all I heard about Napoleon. Napoleon is the one person, is the one individual in history that I can give you a full lecture without doing any research. That's how inundated I was about Napoleon. And to be honest, I kind of like Napoleon before I really learned who he was and what he was about. Because we're force-fed this European mythology that they were these greatest people on earth, and they fought for freedom and liberty and justice for all, which is all bull. But General Toussaint actually did that. And as a matter of fact, in his constitution, he wrote the first constitution in the world that stated all people are born free. The first person to do that. Now, adversity gives birth to greatness.
Excuse me, can I, yes. You may already are going to address this, but wasn't one of their, part of the Haitian Revolution, one of the things that they wanted to do was to come to the United States and free us too?
I'm gonna get to that.
Okay.
But I can go ahead and jump into it. Yes.
Sorry to jump ahead.
No, that's fine. That's fine. That's why I'm here. Now, General Toussaint, not only were the plantation owners and presidents, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, they were afraid that Toussaint would come to the United States to fight, on the plantations and free Black people. As a matter of fact, the only president actually acknowledged the Haiti in their independence was John Adams. I believe John Adams was the second president of the United States. He's believe it or not, Toussaint was actually doing business with America, as part of a peace treaty so that he wouldn't fight them. So they were like, okay, we need sugar because Haiti supplied the world 60% of the world's sugar and 40% of the world's coffee. Like, that's an immense amount of money. Haiti was one of the most richest countries in the world, and it still is today, which I'm gonna get to in a second. Toussaint not only was going to invade America to free African Americans on the plantations, but also the surrounding Caribbean. The governor of Jamaica begged the United States. He begged the United States to make sure that Toussaint does not invade Jamaica to free the enslaved Africans there. I never call our people slaves. They were enslaved. So I always say enslaved 1,000,000 times. And to that point, Toussaint was he was such a powerful figure. And as I continue reading and learning more about him and the revolution, I began to think to myself, like, man, this man was like a real life Avenger. Like, he was a superhero, but not a mythical one, but a real one. And he was preparing because he was buying guns from the United States in exchange for sugar. So they were getting sugar from us, and they were giving us guns. He was loading up guns and buying guns, having white Frenchmen or white Americans who were in the island to go to, different parts of the world, but mainly in America, to buy guns. But also what he was doing, he was having these Frenchmen go to America, acting like they were slave owners, wanted to buy, our ancestors, but he was buying them and freeing them in Haiti. As a matter of fact, Haiti was known as Freedom Land in the early 19th century. If you can get free and get to Haiti, no matter where you were, white or black, and you were escaping oppression, you could come to Haiti and be free. So that's the kind of danger or enemy to the United States and the European powers Toussaint was. And also, I must add, now I'm thinking I have a bias for, Toussaint being the greatest leader of all times, the greatest hero. Like, I was always saying that, not because I'm Haitian, but just the facts, just my own research and due diligence. But when I read that in page 3 of Marcus Garvey's book, Life and Lessons, now I have he co-signed that, so it wasn't just me believing that. Many people believe that. Toussaint was getting ready to attack not only the US and different islands in the Caribbean, he was taking the battle straight to the slave ports of Africa. When that information got to Thomas Jefferson, Napoleon Bonaparte, who's the Emperor of France, and Cromwell and some other figures, they conspired to stop him. Like, he's gonna mess up our business, the Atlantic slave trade. He was gonna stop it. He was literally going to the slave ports. He was gonna take the battle to the front lines, and that needs to be acknowledged. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna, and a few other facts about Toussaint. He was a millionaire. That's another thing that I didn't know about. He owned properties, he had plantations. And one thing I didn't like that I read about him is that he also accepted slavery to a degree, but it wasn't slavery, but he did force the Haitians that did not want to work after they got freed. We gotta work. How are we gonna eat and do business? We gotta work. So people who did not want to work, he punished them, and he made them work. But I must add this to his credit: you were gonna get some of the profits. You wasn't working for free. You were gonna get some of the profits, and everybody was gonna pay taxes. And he was a man of his word, and he was the epitome of the new black mind in the modern world. And not to mention that he was also the son of a king in West Africa, king of Alada. There's a country in West Africa called Dahomey. I did this project when I was in college, African Studies. Thank God I did this course. We had a protest at my university, Florida Atlantic University, for them to give us some sort of African course, because I refused to graduate college and not take some sort of African course. And I'm here studying European greatness, Asian greatness, American greatness, but nothing about Africans or Africa in the books. And so we protested, and the next semester they ended up getting this course my junior year, African Studies. So did a big project. The kingdom of Dahomey, which is Benin today, was the word kingdom that most Haitians come from. So the enslaved Africans that the French enslaved and brought to the Caribbean, they brought the right ones. They brought the ones who had the warrior spirit, the ones who was already about that business, so to speak, is how we say it where I'm from, that they were about that business and fighting and defending themselves and protecting themselves. And so eventually they got their confidence. I want to show you guys, I'm gonna give you guys an example of something. Can you guys see what this is in my hand?
Yes, it's
This is a bowl of black beans.
Black beans, yeah.
Yes. Now, this is how witty and smart and cunning Toussaint was. Now, I mentioned that everyone was afraid of being put back on the shackles and on the plantations for the white man. So there was a story that Toussaint was asked by one of his soldiers, one of the farmers rather, you know, because Toussaint was doing business with white people because he understood commerce and trade. He understood that if we're going to succeed as a nation, we need to do business with other countries, you know, and Jean-Jacques Dessalines did not like it. And many other people didn't like it, but they trusted his vision. So he took a bowl just like this, black beans representing the Africans in Haiti, and he took a few grains of rice and he dumped it in there. And he told the young man, do you see this? How can they put us back in slavery? We are the majority. They are the minority. And that's how he really spoke to people. He knew how to speak and empathize with people. And that's what made him such a great leader. He was also a humanitarian. Toussaint's name, even his name is powerful. He's actually a real life Moses. If you guys are familiar with the story, the Bible story of Moses, he was actually the real life Moses. Now, Toussaint was born, his name, Toussaint Louverture, Toussaint means All Saints Day. He was born on All Saints Day. So already he's a prophet when he was born. Louverture, his last name, means one who finds the way, or one who finds the open. Now, for him to have fought and freed his people, he had an amazing ability and mastery of self to find ways to win. Now, there were underground railways or underground railroads, just like in the United States, that Harriet Tubman and many other abolitionists were, you know, getting our ancestors and helping them escape the plantations. There were mountains and there were tunnels underneath these mountains. And so the French thought that the Haitians were magical, and which to a degree definitely was some magic involved, but they were just disappearing and doing guerrilla warfare. So they weren't just disappearing just like that, you know, out of magic. They were hiding within the mountains and reappearing out of nowhere. His name also evoked spiritual powers of the ancestors. He was very well in tune with his African culture and spirit. His presence alone has so much electricity. You know, his aura was so powerful that if he was to step into a room, it put people in a frenzy. You know, so his soldiers, people, they literally lived and died for General Toussaint Louverture. And there's a story when Jean-Jacques Dessalines was offered by General Leclerc, which is Napoleon Bonaparte's brother-in-law, to betray Toussaint. Jean-Jacques Dessalines put his hands in front of Leclerc and told him, you might as well cut my hands off right now, because I would never betray our leader. That's how much they were in love with General Toussaint. And he escaped death that we know of at least 8 times. Now, the many faces of Toussaint. Now you have all these depictions of Toussaint. There's like, what is it, about 15 to 20 different images of Toussaint. When I was in college and really getting into the zone with studying the Haitian Revolution and getting in touch with my people's history, I was like, there's no way this man exists. Like, you know, the stories I was reading and hearing, I started asking my grandfather here in the U.S. and you know, my cousins who born and raised in Haiti but lived in Miami. I was asking about him, and I began to believe, like, this man's a myth. There's no way he's real, because there's no actual real painting of Toussaint that exists. And if I could give you my theory why that is, Napoleon Bonaparte, who was a arch enemy of Toussaint. Napoleon was known in Kemet to have blown off the noses off the statues and the Sphinx in Egypt. Kemet is what Egypt is today. So when General Toussaint was during like 1801, he was kidnapped in 1801 and brought to France. His house was also invaded. Now, he was too wealthy of a person. Mind you, I told you he was a millionaire. He was too wealthy of a person to not have had a painting of himself. So my theory is, and I'm still doing research on this, but I'm going to put it out there, that Napoleon had his men, because Napoleon understood the power of imagery. He understood that if people was to know who he was or have a picture of him, it was going to spread around the world, because Napoleon had 2 or 3 newspapers himself and countless paintings of himself. I'm sure you all are familiar with the painting of him on the horse, which is one of the most popular paintings besides the painting of Mona Lisa. And Toussaint, I truly believe he had a painting of himself. But they ransacked his house looking for his treasure, because it was told that he had $40 million hidden somewhere, through trade, and possibly, took money from the French who was getting ready to send it to France, because out of the 25 million people in France, 1 million out of 25 million people directly benefited from the slave trade in Haiti specifically, not to mention other countries that they had enslaved our people and had them working on plantations. Now, the wealth of Saint Dominique, which is Haiti, enriched France. They worked 16 to 23 work days, 16 to 23 hours working a day. That is ridiculous. They literally worked themselves to death. You ever heard that phrase, work your fingers to the bone, or I work my fingers to the bone? I'm not saying that's where it came from, but they literally worked to death. The life expectancy of the Haitians was only 3 to 7 years. And as a matter of fact, it was cheaper just to get more enslaved Africans and bring them to the field. So they'll work you till you die and just get some more to replace you. They had no love, no care for Haiti. The extreme cruelty. I'm gonna skip the story about the Jean case 1778 for the sake of time. Haiti doesn't get recognized until the Civil War, 1865. Now, Haiti was freed 1801. They freed themselves, but wasn't recognized until 1865. Why is that? Because the Civil War was actually started in 1862, if I'm not mistaken. So Abraham Lincoln and all the presidents before Abraham Lincoln, particularly George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, both who put together combined $500,000 at that time, which is God knows how much money is today. They invested in France to beat the Haitian in the revolution, and make sure that this did not get out of control, that France get their property in check, and that didn't happen, which is another reason why the U.S. hates Haiti to this day. And but Abraham Lincoln, he had to recognize the Haitians because their independence, because how can you go to civil war, which is really over slavery, thanks to the critical race theory that's going on right now. They're trying to block this history. But how can you go to war to stop the slave trade or slavery, the Union and the Confederates going to war? Abraham Lincoln knew that the country was being torn apart. But how can you go to war and have all these enslaved Africans on the plantations? You follow what I'm saying? But not recognize the Africans who freed themselves and had the ability to govern themselves, and were doing that. So in order to not seem like a bigot, or more importantly, the Union was gonna lose the war unless they had some more people, which the enslaved African men played a major part in. That's why the Union won the war, because they allowed the Black men to join in that fight, which I find very interesting. Moving along here. This is a picture of me when I was in Haiti. This is my cousin here. We were riding, they say these are horses, but these are donkeys. So in the Citadel, this is the Citadel. So you either take a donkey that takes you about 45 minutes to an hour to get up the hill. And this is me on the very top of the citadel. And so with it is so high in the sky, I was literally in the clouds. That's how high this fortress is. You see all the clouds right there? The clouds you can't see in the picture, but my face and body was in the clouds. That's how high in the sky it is. Magnificent place. And that's the tour guide right there in the blue shirt. And I was correcting him a lot of things he was saying, because you know, some things he was saying was incorrect, but he did teach me quite a few things. Moving along, I mentioned this part already regarding 60% of the world's sugar came from Haiti, 40% of the coffee as well. When France lost order in Haiti, which was the cash cow, that's when you start getting the French Revolution taking place. Because now they don't have all this money. Now they're going crazy, because when Haiti stopped working on the plantations, France started declining as a government, which is very interesting. The two coincides. And out of the two major revolutions of the time, the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Haitian Revolution was one of the most complex, but they don't even recognize Haiti. You know, they don't even talk about Haitian Revolution, which is a whole nother situation. So this is the French Revolution. I'm going to skip this part for sake of time, but I would say that things got so crazy in France that they beheaded their own king and queen. The debauchery, the savagery of the French people, which I truly believe are some of the most cruel and evilest people in the world. You know, and it's another topic on why I'm saying this, because I've been studying France for some years. They have a history of a lot of demonic behavior, and they even created a guillotine, and they used that on their own king and queen, King Louis and Marie Antoinette in 1793. It's a picture of the beheading right here. White sugar, which is white gold. That's mainly what it was all about. And now I want to get to Haiti's current condition. I want to speed things up a little bit. Number one question: why is Haiti the way it is today? And I'm sure you guys you're gonna have tons of questions after I say this. For one, Haiti was extorted for 150 gold francs, right? Called an indemnity tax, which was reduced to 90 gold francs in 1838. They had to pay France because the French people lost money and property. The property was the enslaved Africans. So they felt as if, Haiti owes them money. So at the very beginning.
Excuse me, Kevin, you mean like 150 million, right?
Yes, 150 million gold francs.
Okay, because you said 150, and then I was okay. I'm sorry, I'm
sorry about that. But yeah, in the pre-station, it says right there 150 million gold francs.
Yeah.
That is a ridiculous amount of money. This is 10 times the GDP of France at the time. They didn't even have this kind of money, but they charged Haiti to pay this for their freedom, which is absolutely ridiculous. And this is a crime against humanity, because from the beginning of the Haitian country, the Haitian government, they were crippled from the beginning. And why did they agree to pay this tax? Because France came with 20,000 ships and guns and cannons and men, and literally, threatened them. There's another name for that. It was a terroristic, approach they took to get Haiti to pay this money. Haiti didn't just willingly, I'm going to pay you, for our freedom, and that's ridiculous. So if any country deserves reparations, which all of African countries and African Americans deserve it, Haiti has a clear-cut case for it. And the New York Times also has wonderful articles, and many other news companies and blogs talk about this. 40% of Haiti's national income was designated to pay the debt to American and French banks. 40%. How can a country grow if most of their money, almost half of their money, is going to paying debts? It's not going to happen. And that's another reason why Thomas Sankara of Bacano Southwood refused the IMF and World Bank's loans, because he understood that if we take these loans and we always are paying debts, we will never grow as a people and be independent. And that's what it was all about. As a result, there's no funds in Haiti for education in the 20th century. there's lack of healthcare, inability to develop public infrastructure. So a lot of people ask me, you know, why is Haiti this? Why is Haiti that? Why is that? It's because from the beginning and even till now, it is heavily influenced by European business people and government, you know, even down to the point where the president of Haiti was assassinated last year in July 7th, which I'll get into that hopefully because of time. The money, French prosperity was built on Haitian poverty and the atrocities on the people. That's why the Haitians fought so hard for their freedom. 1 million people in France out of, I mentioned earlier, 1 million people in France out of 25 depended on the agriculture and goods from Saint Dominique. Like, this is how important Haiti was to France. Haiti was the heart of France, so to speak, because all their money came from it. It was if Haiti was not producing sugar, coffee, indigo, and et cetera, France was going to starve, which we seen what happened, the disorder, and they end up hanging and killing their own king and queen. Napoleon Bonaparte, when he lost the war against Toussaint Louverture, he had to sell the Louisiana territory for 15 million francs. Now, why is that important? U.S. wouldn't be the size it is if it wasn't for Haiti, because Napoleon had every intention of invading the U.S. and making the U.S. a French territory. We'll be speaking French right now if Haiti did not beat the French, because Thomas Jefferson wanted the Louisiana territory, but France wouldn't sell it. But Napoleon went broke fighting against the Haitians for the 12 years. The plantations in Haiti, there were 500, roughly about 600 something sugar plantations, 3,379 indigo plantations. And at the height of Haiti's agriculture, or height of slavery, 1767, 72 million pounds of sugar, 2 million pounds of cotton were produced in Haiti and shipped directly to France. The occupation of 1915, now here's the killer. This is why Haiti went further into debt. The U.S. occupied Haiti from 1915 to 1934, really decolonized Haiti, which you will never read that in the history books, but that's exactly what happened. And it continues today in 2022. The U.S. Marines robbed Haiti of $20 million in gold, $20 million in gold, and sent it to the New York bank. This money was when Haiti was first creating its national bank. So they literally took out all the money that the Haitian government had to create infrastructure. So the money was taken out. You know, it's supposedly the Marines were told that, you know, U.S. By the U.S. president at the time, which I want to say this was Truman, President Truman, and that you know, they take this money for good keeping, because these Africans, these Haitians don't know what to do with their money. So let's take it. They send it to New York. They also changed the Constitution of General Toussaint's Constitution of 1801. They changed it, and they amended it. Even Sallin in 1805, who made the amendments that no foreigners, no white foreigners can own land in Haiti, because he understood that if they own land, then they can enslave us. So he put the Constitution, he amended it saying no white man can own land. The U.S. came, 1915, they changed that. So now you have the Clintons, and God knows how many other, the Clinton Foundation, how many other European countries, Asian countries coming to Haiti, and they own thousands of acres of land, particularly in the north, because there was gold. There was a $40 billion worth of gold, oil, natural minerals, zinc, copper, found in Haiti right after the earthquake in 2010. Now, President Chavez said before he died, who's a big supporter of Haiti. As a matter of fact, in his honor, Haiti created Cap Haitien, which where my people are from. They named that airport because there's two airports in Haiti. There's one in Port-au-Prince, which is the capital, which is more towards the south, and you have the one in the north, in Cap Haitien. They named it after President Chavez, and he said that earthquake 2010 was not a natural earthquake that killed 300,000 people. This was an earthquake created by the U.S. Marines by a software, a tool called HAARP, HAARP. And what they use this tool for, it creates frequencies in the earth So when they're looking for oil and gold to see where they should start mining, they use this, and they use it to shake the earth a little bit to make it easier to dig. And it is said or believed, there's a book that I read called by William Eghart called The World Domination by European. I have the book back here somewhere. I haven't finished reading it. But when I heard his interview, I bought this book. And what he said was that they shook the ground a little too hard, you know, because it literally creates earthquakes. You know what I'm saying? It literally shakes the earth. And right after the 2010 earthquake, January 2010 earthquake, now less than 30 days, it comes out, this, you know, the US and Canada and France, Haiti has $40 billion worth of, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not a coincidence. And you also have the assassination of Jovenel Moïse, July 7, 2021, which caused Haiti to be even more, you know, more disorder, more poverty, you know, more US occupation. You know what I'm saying? So these things aren't a coincidence. I'll skip this part.
Can I ask, is this because you know, I hadn't heard about those waves, but is this like fracking? Because I had seen articles at the time, because this happened in like 2010.
Correct.
I had seen, you know, that fracking caused, because they hadn't had an earthquake in 200 years before then, and then they just had one recently.
Correct.
Yeah.
But the big one, I'm really not sure what fracking is, to be honest with you, but I do know what HARP is. You know, HARP stands for a High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program.
Yes.
And there's books, scientists are saying, you know, there's been protests against the US using this technology. As a matter of fact, HARP is so powerful that it can create rain. They can direct where it rains. You know what I'm saying? So they're playing with Mother Nature here, you know, and there's evidence of it. Now, they're not going to ever admit that we caused the death of 300,000 people in Haiti to look for oil and gold. But we know the Europeans are bloodsuckers. We know how US get down, not just in Haiti, but different parts of, you know, Africa. You know, France to this day has about 13, 14 countries that are still paying slave tax to France, which is ridiculous. But this HARP program, you know, a lot of people, you know, shy away from talking about it because there's no concrete evidence the US did this. But we do know that the Clinton Foundation and Hillary Clinton's brother, who's now passed away, has mining contracts and are paying Haiti pennies on a dollar for what in other countries, they're paying them a lot more money to be able to go dig in the countries. And just because Haiti has all this oil and gold, which is, you know, the answer to a lot of the poverty Haiti is going through. But at the same time, you have to be careful when you're digging, and because you're polluting the air, you're polluting the water, the vegetations get bad whenever you have heavy digging and mining. So people have to be careful when they're doing such. So besides that, moving along,
just one more thing, and I know
yes,
this might be taking us on a tangent. I'm sorry. Okay. I was just, could you put that information, that HARP information, in the chat? That's very interesting to me. Or, you know, if it's going to take you too far out, maybe you can send that to me, you know, just privately, because that's something I'm really interested in.
Oh, no, that's not a problem at all. And I'm also going to hang hard. Here it is. Now I'm going to put that in the chat world.
Also, how can we find some of your other YouTube videos that I've heard you mention tonight?
Oh, you know, I could definitely post, you know, I could definitely post one right now in the chat. That's not a problem at all. I have so many, particularly on Haiti. And I mean, I'm very passionate about it. You know, this is something, because the way Haiti, what I'm going to do is send you this video that I made here in the chat. I can send that right quick. The way Haiti is being treated, I just feel like, okay, since they want to dog Haiti, least we can do is help change the narrative of Haiti, and that's what I've been working hard to do for quite some time. And I'm putting that HARP information here about HARP, and the U.S. military closes HARP, which I heard about it. They supposedly stopped using this software, but we would never really know. I'm pasting this article in the chat right now by NBC News. So this isn't some blogger. Someone. This is really happening. That HARP is really destroying a lot of lives. And it's unfortunate that many people died in Haiti over the greed of the U.S. So let me go ahead and carry on with the lecture.
You know what? And this is a vast topic that we need to have you back, Kevin, to do a part 2. But we only have like about 8 minutes left. And okay. I think there's some questions that people are interested in posing. So if there are questions, let's take them now. And it's a vast topic, a lot of parts to it. You gave tremendous historical information. I mean, one of the best presentations, and we've had a couple of good ones on Haiti just this year. This is one of the best presentations I've ever heard on Haiti. Okay, Brother Amin has his hand raised, and then there are other questions as well. All right.
Yeah, I have a question about the HARP. Also, I was wondering, do you think that the HARP has anything to do with these fires that we're having also? We're seeing large communities being burned in California.
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, these fires, thanks to Dr. Amos Wilson, whenever you see tragedy happening to people, you have to ask yourself, who benefits from it? And honestly, I don't know. I don't know if that's the reason, but someone is creating those fires. And we have to find out who's benefiting from it. So I really don't know if HARP has something to do with that, but I do know they have a lot to do with natural disasters. Heavy rains, tornadoes, and earthquakes.
Right, Brother Minister Amadi has his hand up. Go ahead, Minister Amadi.
Okay, Hotep family.
Yeah.
So my question is about Toussaint Louverture.
Yeah.
I wanted you, if you could comment on. So some people say that his weakness, even as we honor him, they feel that his downfall was that he still, identified as with his French, with his French background. And even as a result of that, that's how they were able to trick him into going back to France, because he still felt some type of allegiance, so to speak, to the French. And so I just wanted you to comment on that particular, idea, if you would.
Yeah, a great question. There were a lot of confusion amongst his own generals and soldiers on why is it that he's trying to, be buddy with the French. You know what I'm saying? But let me say this though, in his defense, he understood that in order for Haiti to succeed and to survive, for his people to survive, he had to do business with a European power, because Europeans were ruling the world at the time. And so he wanted to do trade. And who else better than the French, who were who literally enslaved his people there. So he felt as if he can have some sort of relationship. And I'll give you a quick example. There were some white women whose husbands were killed during the Haitian Revolution. And what a lot of his men did not like is the fact that he allowed these women to live on those plantations, to have those mansions. And he also paid them a stipend, so they can, live and survive. Toussaint is one of the only people I've ever read about where white people, men and women, would actually kneel and bow down to him. You know what I'm saying? They literally bowed to Toussaint as a king because he saved their lives. And he told his men, do not kill these people just to be doing it. And one of his nephews had killed a couple of the white men against Toussaint's orders. So Toussaint literally killed his own nephew for doing so. So this caused a lot of distrust amongst his men. But Jean Dessalines, who's like the top soldier, if he supported Toussaint, then the rest were going to support him. And so, but he was doing that because he wanted a relationship with them, and he wasn't tricked to go to France. He sacrificed his life so that Napoleon would not invade Haiti again, because he knew they couldn't take another battle. It's been going on for too long. And so, knowing that, he knew he was going to die. There's no way you're going to defeat the French, the Spanish, and the British in war and then just live and survive to tell about it. He knew he was going to die. But when they came, he literally sacrificed himself and his two children so that they would not fight in Haiti again. At least that's what he thought. And Dessalines and Christophe would have just ended up fighting the French anyway, which ended up happening.
Ashe. Well, thank you for this perspective. Basically kind of framing it from a perspective of his visionary, approach, that he was a visionary, and as a result, he ended up having to pay that price. So thank you, brother. Appreciate that. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Brother Kalahari has his hand up. Go ahead, Brother Kalahari. And take yourself off mute to ask your question. And then Bamidele. I'm sorry. Kalahari, then Bamidele. Go ahead.
Can you hear me, Minister?
Yes.
About the name changes of the Haitians, according to Professor Clark, and he was quoting Richard B. Moore, slaves and dogs are named by their master. Free men name themselves.
Amen.
Was that in Gina? In Gina, he said? Was that in Gina? Was that her name?
Nzinga.
It was suggested on TikTok that she was a same-sexer. She had 19 men in London, even though, according to Professor Clark, she had married 3 times. So I don't know. The other thing about in Gina was that she went to Portugal to talk to them about the war, and they wouldn't seat her. They wouldn't allow her to sit down. One of her soldiers sat down on all fours, and she sat on him. So
that's true.
Go ahead. Get somebody else.
So Kalahari, just a point of clarification. Queen Anne Nzinga, that took place in Angola. She did not go to Portugal, and that's actually represented in Destruction of Black Civilization on that chapter. So there's actually an illustration.
I got that book too.
Of that, yes. All right, so next question is Bamidele, then Judy. Then Sister Judy.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
When you mentioned about the people escaping, and there were tunnels or some kind of some manner in which they escaped. Well, in Haitian lore, Guanbois, who represents the forest or the trees, is said to be the protector of the so-called Maroons. And so it's not, at least according to Haitian lore, that serves as one kind of explanatory factor. But I also had a question about Toussaint, especially since he was born on All Saints' Day. Do you know of him being connected to the Gede or the ancestral forces?
A gay
I
day?
mean, in terms of Haitian voodoo.
Tucson did not practice voodoo, from my understanding, but many of his soldiers did. What he did allow them to do was to practice voodoo if they wanted to, because the homie, which is where majority of the Haitians came from, the Africans came from, that in Haiti, that country practiced voodoo heavily. It was an everyday thing. It's like how we get up to brush our teeth or pray in the mornings or pray before we go to sleep or pray for food. They practice voodoo 365, 24 hours a day to honor their ancestors.
Mhm.
And so it wasn't necessarily something for magic. It was just a way to honor the ancestors and to invoke the spiritual powers of the ancestors. And that's why he called himself Loventure, because by him doing so, it's like you're calling yourself, great, calling yourself a king or queen. It's like you're automatically gonna have your head lifted up and be able to see a way out of trouble. And that's why I'm writing working on the film, writing and hoping to produce a film on the legacy of Toussaint, because his story is not told. Danny Glover was working on the film for a very long time. He got shut down by Hollywood because it doesn't have any white heroes. Oprah Winfrey donated to it millions of dollars. Chavez donated $18 million towards it. So it was a lot of money. So I hope to raise roughly $30 to $40 million to actually produce a film, because our children's children need to know his story. And I'm going to do my best to do so.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great question. Great question. Before Sister Judy goes, Tony has a question in the chat that speaks about what's going on regarding the border between Haiti and Dominican Republic. Why don't you address that? We've gone over a little bit, but that's okay. And then take Sister Judy's question.
You wanted me to actually address the borders of the DR and Haiti?
Yeah,
Well,
briefly, can you?
Yes, Haiti and the DR have a long history of hatred towards one another. Before Toussaint was kidnapped by the year 1793, he had unified the whole island. You have the eastern part of the island owned by the Spanish, the western part owned by the French. And so when Toussaint became the leader, he fought and kicked the Spanish out and made the island that island was Hispaniola, is what it called, unified. Now a lot of the Dominican Republican, which is now known, a lot of their ancestors died. So there was a president, I can't remember his name. He has slaughtered at the border thousands of Haitians at the border. This man hated Haitians with a passion. He was just a cruel person all the way around. And so it's been going back and forth. Now that we're in the pandemic or post-pandemic, if you want to call it that, there's a limited resources, right? So the DR wants to keep those resources just for them, knowing that Haiti is suffering due to the international involvement of US, France, and Canada, and God knows who else. A lot of Haitians have moved or migrated to the DR. I have several friends and family members who left Haiti to go to the DR for jobs or higher paying wages. Right now, Haiti is protesting right now as we speak because of the, getting paid $1 a day or $5 a day, the 65 cents an hour wages that these big companies like Target and Walmart and Levi's are paying them. And so they're going to the DR for pay. So they want to put up this border to be ignorant, to be honest with you. So hopefully it's not successful, but that is happening. I am well aware of it.
Thank you. That's a great answer. Sister Judy, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to say to you, King Kevin Dorival, that was an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And the thing that I wanted to I wanted to mention about HARP and wanted you to confirm if you know. I know that some of the tsunamis have been blamed on the HARP, different tsunamis. I know there's a lot of things. HARP has been around for quite a while. I think, yeah, we've been hearing about it since at least in the late 90s.
Wow.
Is that possible, or have you heard any connection of HARP with the tsunamis?
Oh yes, I've heard of it. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, and good question, Judy. Thanks for making this presentation happen. The HARP has been used for many natural disasters. They, for some reason, they're doing it and not understanding the repercussions of it. I don't think that, and I would like to think that the U.S. didn't. They didn't think that it would kill 300,000 people in Haiti. I don't think that they would have went forward with it. I would hope that they wouldn't do it. They have some sort of heart. They wouldn't do something like that. So creating a tsunami, creating tornadoes, earthquakes. That's the power of this HARP system. I mean, it literally shakes the world. It literally shakes the earth. And there were reports in Haiti that they heard some sort of explosion before the earthquake happened. Earthquakes don't make explosions. So where does explosion come from? You know what I'm saying? So unfortunately, the powers that be have the money and power to, use these type of technology to get what they want. And I didn't mention, Judy and everyone, I didn't mention earlier, Haiti has something called iridium. Iridium is one of the rarest metals in the world, the most expensive metal in the world. At 1 ounce is worth 1 ounce of iridium is worth $6,000. A ton of it is worth $45 billion. And it said that Haiti has mountains of iridium. That's another reason why the U.S. is so heavily involved in Haiti, so they can exploit and export this iridium, which is used for spaceships, weapons, used for technology. They're using spaceships because it's heat resistant. You know what I'm saying? So if they can keep Haiti looking poor, just like the European powers do in Africa, if they keep the country poor, then whenever the white man comes as a savior, everyone's happy, or the white man's here. But they're really there to exploit these countries, and they're doing it legally right in our faces, right in plain view. And unfortunately, this is it. Next time I get on one of these presentations, I'm going to talk about how we can actually stop this. An idea of how we can stop the exploitation of Haiti and other countries, because Haiti, I mean, they're really suffering. My cousins called me. I send money to Haiti on a regular basis, and I just hear the stories of the suffering. When I went to Haiti, I had a great time. All the images you see of Haiti being poor and no trees and people living on the streets. Yeah, some parts of Haiti is like that, just like any other city in the world. In America, right here in Atlanta. You turn on one of these bridges, you see people living, under the bridge. You have in California, they have that. What do you call it, California? The area, Skid Row. Is that what it's called, Skid Row?
That's everywhere, man.
Yeah, you're gonna have that.
LA.
But that's all they put on TV, and that's for a reason. The power of imagery. Napoleon understood this back in the 17th, 18th century. He understood the power of imagery, and that still plays on to this day. Even Hitler said, if you tell a big lie long enough, everyone will believe it. And so they're putting these images of Haiti being poor. When I went to Haiti, it's probably one of the most beautiful countries I've ever seen. I had such a great time. I wanted to stay in Haiti. You know what I'm saying? Longer, but I had to get back to work. The beautiful people, beautiful women, beautiful men out there. There's roads. There's roads there, obviously. Hotels. There's resorts. The beaches are gorgeous. The food is immaculate. Fresh food cooked in your face. You guys like chicken. I mean, I seen my cousin's wife. She killed the chicken right in my face, skinned it and cooked it, and it was one of the best meals I ever had in my life, right there in your face. So don't believe everything you read. And thank you all. I know we went way over time, but I'm just so thankful to have been here. Thanks.
Brother Kevin, King Kevin, that was such a top ranking.
Thank you. Appreciate that.